Okay, hello and welcome to the next class of English. We'll be doing lesson number 2 today from the book First Flight, and we'll be doing the second chapter, that is A Long Walk for Freedom by Nelson Mandela. Okay, so in today's video, we'll be doing the explanation and the difficult words from the chapter, and we'll try to know that what is the message of the chapter, why are we studying this chapter, and what was so special that this chapter was included as a part of your curriculum, right? Okay, so this chapter is by Nelson Mandela, and the name of this chapter is Long Walk to Freedom. So as we all know that Nelson Mandela was the African president. In fact, he was the first black president of Africa, and he spent 30 years in prison for fighting for the rights of the black people. This is not a story, of course. It's a non-fictional work, and this has been taken as an excerpt from his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom. Okay, so because this is about the author himself, we'll come to know what were the various events he went through during this time, and what is the main highlight of the story. What is so special regarding this autobiography that we are reading this excerpt today. Okay, so before we read, we need to know this one word, and this is actually the most important thing in the entire chapter, that is apartheid. Okay, which is a political system that separates people according to their race, right? So in different countries, people are discriminated in different ways, and in a lot of Western countries, people are discriminated based on their race, which is like, their skin color. They are basically uh, discriminated based on their skin color, and this discrimination is done by, white people, the fairer group of people who have a fair skin tone, who have a fair skin. They do the discrimination based on other people because they are black. Okay, so this is basically about, this is a fight between black and white. It's not even fight, it's just a way where black people have been discriminated for a very long time. Even in recent times, even to this day, racial discrimination is prevalent in a lot of parts of the world. Even it happens even in our country to a certain extent. But the thing is that in here it's not a form of apartheid. Okay, it's just a form of social discrimination that exists. So it is not that bad over here. But in a lot of other countries, you will find that people are literally struggling to still overcome this social evil that exists. Okay. So can you say which of the three countries named below had such a political system until very recently? So until very recently, it's US and it's also Africa. Okay. And it's actually all the three countries that have been mentioned here. They all have the same political system, which is based on apartheid. Okay. Where the black people have been discriminated by the fairer group of people. Okay. So Mandela and his African National Congress spent a lifetime fighting against apartheid, and this was the reason, because they were fighting against apartheid, because they were fighting for the rights of the black people. This was the reason why he was sent to jail, and it's unimaginable. Like, he spent over 30 years in jail. Okay, and finally, when the democratic elections were held, okay, South Africa in 1994, he became the first black president of a new nation. Okay, so that was the first sense of democracy which Africa saw after he became the president, and he was very loved by the people over there. And also, he's one of the most famous personalities in the world today, because he always talked about peace, and he always wanted all nations and all people to live in harmony. Okay, so he always cared about the welfare of the people, and that is the reason why people still like him. to this day. Okay, so this is an extract from his autobiography, okay, Long Walk to Freedom, where he speaks about a historic occasion, which is the inauguration. Okay, just the way we have inauguration in our countries, like when politicians get a certain position over here, like let's say politician has become a minister of certain particular department in the country, certain particular ministry. So even here, they go for their inauguration ceremony where they have to take an oath to be obliged to perform their duties for the till the time they are in power. That's the same thing. This is the same occasion which happened in Africa when Mandela became the president. Okay, and it was the year 1994. This date is quite important. Okay, this date is 10th May 1994. This was the day when he became the president, and he was the first black president. Okay, so, as we see in the excerpt, it's written Nelson Mandela has become South Africa's first black president after more than 3 centuries of white rule. So, because the people in this country were under the white rule for such a long time, it took a long way for him to become the president of this country. Okay. And his African National Congress party won 252 out of the 400 seats in the first democratic elections of South Africa, which is like more than half of the majority. Okay. And the inauguration ceremony took place in Union Buildings in Amphitheater in Pretoria today. Okay. This is important that in where had this event taken place. So this event had taken place in Union Buildings Amphitheater, which is in Pretoria today, and it was attended by politicians and dignitaries from more than 140 countries around the world. So you can imagine how big this inauguration would have been, because people came from more than 140 countries, like almost the entire world politicians, dignitaries, and big significant people were over there to witness the day. So that day in itself becomes like very historic. And never again will this beautiful land experience the oppression of one by another, said Nelson Mandela in his address. Okay, so he had given a speech, of course, when he became the president, and that speech is something which has been mentioned in this book, Long Walk by Freedom. So, Long Walk for Freedom is the book that he wrote. It was his autobiography, which talks about his journey to get freedom for his people, to get freedom for his country, to about fighting against apartheid. And apart from that, it is and it also talks about the day when he was celebrated as the president, okay, as the first black president of the country. So jubilant scenes on the streets of Pretoria followed the ceremony, with blacks, whites, and colorists celebrating together. More than 10,000 South African men, women, and children of all races sang and danced with joy. So, this is one thing. So, this tells us how beautiful that day would have been in that country, because all people came together without any discrimination, without any hatred towards each other, and came under the same sky and celebrated. Okay? Yes. So, we can start with the text first. Okay? So 10th May dawned bright and clear. For the past few days, I had been pleasantly besieged by dignitaries and world leaders who were coming to pay their respects before the inauguration. Who is I here? The author himself, Nelson Mandela himself, is writing this thing. So I had been pleasantly besieged by the dignitaries and the world leaders who were coming to pay their respects before the inauguration. The inauguration would be the largest gathering ever of international leaders on South African soil, which is true, because no other place in the world would have seen such a huge inauguration. 1994 is almost like 28 years from now, right? We are in 2022, and that was 28 years ago. So 28 years ago, for such a big event to take place, that is something very remarkable in itself. So that is true, which has been written about the event over here. So to be besieged, to be surrounded closely by. Okay. This means besiege means to be surrounded closely by, because he was becoming the president. There was so much joy throughout the world that everyone was congratulating him, was coming to his country to visit him, to see him, to witness this huge event, this historic event. The ceremonies took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheater formed by the Union buildings in Pretoria. For decades, this land has been the seat of white supremacy. So it is something that started during the British rule. Okay. Just like Britishers had captured the other countries, even Africa was one of the countries which they had dominated for a very long time. But here the case was slightly different, because a lot of people of the white race, they gradually went on to dominate this place. And because they were white, they believed that they had all the power vested in their hands. So they went on to become the politicians. They took the power in their hands, and nothing was given to the black people. Okay, so now it was the site of a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations for the installation of South Africa's first democratic non-racial government. Not because that he was black, he was chosen, but because he had fought for a reason, and also because he was fighting for people's equality. Okay, that was the reason why he was chosen. So that's why he says that this was the first democratic, which means for all the people, and a non-racial government. Okay, so now it was the site of a rainbow gathering. Rainbow gathering because people from all over the world, people of the entire country were here under the same sky celebrating this day. Okay, so amphitheater is a building without a roof with many rows of seats rising in steps. Okay, it was this is a form of architecture which was which originated in Greece and Rome. So amphitheaters are still prevalent. You still see them in colleges and other places. Okay. So because it is able to accommodate a large number of audience. So on that lovely autumn day, I was accompanied by my daughter Zenani. On the podium, Mr. de Klerk was first sworn in as the second deputy president. Okay, so this person was the one who became the second deputy president. Then Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as the first deputy president. So basically, they had two deputy presidents. So this person was the first deputy president, Thabo Mbeki. When it was my turn, I pledged to obey and uphold the constitution and to devote myself to the well-being of the republic and its people. Okay, so then it was Nelson Mandela's turn to take the pledge, and he took the pledge that he would devote himself to the well being of the Republic and its people. Okay, to the assembled guests and the world watching world, I said. Okay, so now the exact words of his speech have been written over here. Okay, have been written in the book also. So his speech was later on accommodated, was also a part of the autobiography. Okay, so everything is in a different font. Today, all of us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. Why liberty? Because for such a long time, Africa was being ruled by the white supremacy. White people were the ones who had all the power, who were ruling this country, dictating everything. But now, finally, they were free of that, and there was going to be a system regardless of race. Okay, regardless of whether people were white or black. So, out of the experience of extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, okay, experience of extraordinary human disaster is what? Apartheid. Okay, this racial discrimination that had been happening for so long, that was the extraordinary human disaster which had lasted for more than decades in this country. Like even for 30 years, Nelson Mandela himself was in the prison. So you can imagine how long this uh, apartheid would have lasted. Okay, how long of a journey, how long of a torture it was for the people in that country. Must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. Okay, so now finally he says that it was the day when his country was free of that rule, and now they were free to breathe under a sky where everyone was equal. Who were outlaws not so long ago. Okay, outlaws means somebody who has been sidelined. Okay, somebody who has been discriminated. जिसके साथ आप discrimination करते हो वो लोगों को आप outlaw बोल रहे. तो here who were the outlaws? The black people were the outlaws. Okay, have today been given the rare privilege to be host to the nations of the world on our own soil. And it was a big day for them also, because they had called almost the entire world to their inauguration for their historic event. So it was one of the first times when Africa was doing something which the entire world was going to see. We thank all our distinguished international guests for having come to take possession with the people of our country of what is, after all, a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity. So he does not restrict this win, he does not restrict this victory only to Africa or only to his own people. He says that this is a common victory for justice, for peace, and for human dignity. Okay, everyone was going to witness this thing, everyone was going to witness this day. So that is the reason why he says that it was something which was the entire world was going to see, right? Because all the nations of the world should be like this, where everyone is given an equal opportunity, where there is no racial oppression or discrimination. So this so he said that his country had set an example for that. His country had set an example for justice, for peace, and for human dignity, where you respect each and everyone as they are. Okay. Now, confer means a formal word here. Okay. Confer means to give. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. Okay, emancipation means liberation. Emancipation means freedom from any kind of restriction. Okay, so finally they were liberated. We pledge ourselves to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. So, what does he say? That at last we have achieved our political emancipation, where we pledge ourselves to liberate all our people, no matter how much oppression they had faced till now. Finally, they were under a free sky where everyone was free, okay, from poverty, from deprivation, from suffering, from discrimination based on gender or any other discrimination that had existed till to that day in Africa. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. Why does he say one by another? Because it was a oppression based on race, right? It was an oppression where white people were oppressing the black people. So it was an oppression done by one sect of society on the other sect of the society. So that is why he says that never again in this land shall, never again on this land shall racial discrimination exist. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. What does this mean? That the sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement means here the sun is not the actual literal sun. Here the sun means, here sun is again a metaphor. Okay, sun is a metaphor over here, which means, yes, so sun is a metaphor over here, which means that finally they were free. Okay, and everything was same for everybody. Okay, so a glorious human achievement, like everyone. This was the sun of what? The sun of liberation. Okay, that the sun is nothing but the liberation which was never to end again. Okay, so let freedom reign. God bless Africa. So deprivation is when you do not is the state of not having one's rightful benefits. Like if you keep people, like we say, sleep deprivation. So what is sleep deprivation? When you do not have enough sleep. So anytime when you are your needs are not fulfilled, okay, or when your rights are not fulfilled, you are deprived of that particular thing. And what is discrimination? I think we all know that it is being treated differently and mostly it's unfavorable. Okay. Now, we will do the oral questions. First is, where did the ceremonies take place? So, the ceremonies took place in the Union Buildings Amphitheatre in Retoria. Can you name any public buildings in India that are made up of sandstone? So, there are a few buildings, even I can't recall. Yeah. So the buildings that are made up of sandstone in India are India Gate is made up of sandstone. Then there are a lot of old monuments that are made up of sandstone in Madhya Pradesh. So there are buildings, different types of buildings in India that are made up of sandstone. Can you say how 10th May is an autumn day in South Africa? Okay. Why is 10th May an autumn day in South Africa? It's because of the uh, it's because of the longitudinal and the latitude difference, of course, the geographical difference. But also, it is an autumn day because everyone was free. Okay, there was no oppression, like किसी भी तरीके का हीट नहीं थी कंट्री में. ओके, एवरीथिंग वाज काम एंड कूल. इट वाज परफेक्ट ब्लेंड. ऑटम इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट परफेक्ट वेदर्स. ठीक है, तो वही चीज था यहाँ पे भी कि लाइक इट वाज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट परफेक्ट वेदर डे जहाँ पे सब कुछ. ऑटम में क्या होता है कि सब कुछ परफेक्ट होता है, राइट? मतलब मौसम ना ज्यादा ठंडा होता है ना ज्यादा गर्म होता है. इट इज वन ऑफ द बेस्ट वेदर्स टू एंजॉय. तो वही चीज है यहाँ पे. वी आर सेइंग द ऑटम डे बिकॉज इट वाज वन ऑफ दोज डेज व्हेन फाइनली everything was in balance. Okay, everything was in favor of the country. Next is, at the beginning of his speech, Mandela mentions an extraordinary human disaster. What does he mean by this? So he means about the apartheid. Apartheid is the racial discrimination that was happening in the country. That racial discrimination was the whites oppressing the black people. Okay? What is the glorious human achievement he speaks of at the end? So glorious human achievement is nothing but the liberation these people had finally got. Okay, it was acquiring the justice, the human dignity, standing up for the human rights. ठीक है, क्योंकि अफ्रीका ने एक एग्जाम्पल सेट किया था. तो इट वॉज अ ह्यूज अचीवमेंट फॉर देम टू शो द वर्ल्ड की एपेटाइट को आप कैसे लड़ सकते हो, आप उसके लिए कैसे पीसफुली लड़ सकते हो, और कैसे आप फाइनली नो मैटर कितनी भी डिफिकल्टी और फाइनली उस चीज को ओवरकम करके आगे आ सकते हो. ठीक है. Fourth is, what does Mandela thank the international leaders for? So he thanks the international leaders for their congratulations, for their time, and to come rejoice with them for the country's liberation. जो justice उनको मिली थी वो celebrate करने के लिए वो उनको thank करते हैं. What ideals does he set out for the future of South Africa? ठीक है, तो what ideals does he set out for the future of South Africa? He just says only and only one thing कि आज के बाद इस कंट्री में कोई भी एक सेक्ट ऑफ पीपल या कोई भी एक तरह के लोग दूसरे तरह के लोगों के साथ डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं करेंगे. नेवर नेवर एंड नेवर अगेन शैल इट बी दैट दिस ब्यूटिफुल लैंड विल अगेन एक्सपीरियंस द ऑपरेशन ऑफ वन बाय अनदर. ठीक है, ये चीज दोबारा कभी भी नहीं होगी. एंड इट इज अ ग्लोरियस ह्यूमन अचीवमेंट कि इतने टाइम से वो लोग ऑपरेस्ड थे, बट फाइनली उस चीज को ओवरकम करके देयर कंट्री वाज सेटिंग एन एग्जांपल फॉर द वर्ल्ड. ठीक है. सो दिस वाज द फ्यूचर ऑफ साउथ अफ्रीका व्हिच ही बिलीव्ड इन कि दोबारा कभी भी उस कंट्री में लोगों के साथ गलत नहीं होगा, उनके साथ कोई भी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं होगा. ठीक है. A few moments later, we all lifted our eyes in awe as a spectacular array of South African jets, helicopters, and troop carriers roared in perfect formation over the Union buildings. It was not only a display of pinpoint precision and military force, but a demonstration of military's loyalty to democracy, to a new government that had been freely and fairly elected. Only moments before, the highest generals of South African Defence Force and Police, their chests bedecked with ribbons and medals from the days gone by, saluted me and pledged their royal loyalty. हाँ, this is an important paragraph क्योंकि यहाँ पे वो बताते हैं साउथ अफ्रीकन मिलिट्री के बारे में. जब नेल्सन मंडेला जेल में थे, when he was inside the jail, तो उस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम पे उनको ऑब्वियसली यही मिलिट्री थी जो उनके अगेंस्ट थी, राइट. यही मिलिट्री थी जो कि व्हाइट रूल के अंदर अंदर थी, तो उनको वही करना पड़ता था जो उनको ऑर्डर्स मिलते थे. सो इवन दे वर अगेंस्ट मंडेला. बट फाइनली व्हेन ही वाज आउट एंड फाइनली नाउ व्हेन ही वाज द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ द कंट्री, तो वही मिलिट्री थी जो उनको रिस्पेक्ट दे रही थी, वाज पेइंग देम रिस्पेक्ट, वाज सैल्यूटिंग देम, एंड दिस वाज द मिलिट्री जिसने उनको प्रॉमिस की अपनी लॉयल्टी, राइट. तो ही टॉक्स अबाउट द चेंज, ठीक है, कि कैसे चीजें चेंज हो जाती हैं. एट सम पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम मिलिट्री उनको हेट करती थी, उनको पसंद नहीं करते थे, उनको ऑर्डर्स दिए जाते थे कि आपको इनके सपोर्ट में नहीं करना है, यू हैव, और आपको या फिर आपको इनके अगेंस्ट रहना है. बट फाइनली अब ऐसा नहीं था, ठीक है. अब वही मिलिट्री थी जो मंडेला की रिस्पेक्ट कर रहे थे. ओके, सो with ribbons and medals from days gone by, saluted me and pledged their loyalty. It was not unmindful of the fact that not so many years before they would not have saluted but arrested me. Obviously, पहले किसी और का रूल था, तो उस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम पे इन लोगों नेल्सन मंडेला को वो ऑब्वियसली अरेस्ट करते, सल्यूट नहीं करते. Finally, a chevron of Impala jets left a smoke trail of black, red, green, blue, and gold of the new South African flag. Yes, साउथ अफ्रीकन फ्लैग अगर आप देखोगे तो इसमें उसमें वो 5 कलर्स होते हैं. एंड फाइनली दिस न्यू फ्लैग वाज अडॉप्टेड along with the advent of the new rule. ठीक है. शेवरॉन इज अ शेप ऑफ वी, ठीक है. इट इज जनरली यूज्ड जब हम मिलिट्री ट्रूप्स और फॉर्मेशंस की बात करते हैं तब हम शेवरॉन वर्ड का यूज करते हैं, ठीक है. The day was symbolized for me by playing of 2 national anthems and the vision of whites singing Nakosi Sikelel Africa and blacks singing Die Step. Okay, the old anthem of the republic. So क्योंकि white people का वहां पे रूल था, they had their English anthem, proper English anthem. और African is a different language, you should know that. ठीक है, कि अफ्रीका में even though they speak English, but African in itself is a very different language. Okay, and in fact पूरे अफ्रीका में, जैसे इंडिया में we have अलग अलग languages हर जगह पे, similarly अफ्रीका में भी बहुत सारे languages और dialects है, ठीक है. तो दिस वाज समथिंग जहां पे दोनों एंथम्स को प्ले किया गया था ताकि ये बताया जा सके कि नो मैटर व्हाट, एट द एंड ऑल पीपल आर इक्वल, ठीक है. ऑल्दो दैट डे नीदर ग्रुप न्यू द लिरिक्स ऑफ द एंथम दे वंस डिस्पाइज्ड, दे वुड सून नो द वर्ड्स बाय हार्ट, ठीक है. क्योंकि व्हाइट पीपल had not allowed these people to play their African anthem, but finally there was going to be a day जब वहां पे उनका अपना anthem भी वो लोग गा सकते थे with all pride and without any fear, ठीक है. तो डिस्पाइज मतलब कि हैड अ वेरी लो ओपिनियन ऑफ, अगर आप किसी चीज को पसंद नहीं करते हो तो आप उसको डिस्पाइज करते हो सिंपली, ठीक है. तो ऑन द डे ऑफ द इनॉग्रेशन आई वाज ओवरवेल्म्ड विद अ सेंस ऑफ हिस्ट्री. ओके, सेंस ऑफ हिस्ट्री मतलब क्या? सेंस ऑफ हिस्ट्री मतलब कि he had all the things, जो भी उन्होंने अभी तक इवेंट्स उनके सामने हुए थे, जो भी उन्होंने लाइफ अपनी देखी थी फॉर हिज कंट्री, वो उनके सामने आ रहा था. इन द फर्स्ट डेकेड ऑफ द 20th century, a few years after the bitter Anglo-Boer War and before my own birth, the white-skinned people of South Africa patched up their differences and erected a system of racial domination against the dark-skinned peoples of their own land. ठीक है. अब यहाँ पे अब आप बोलोगे कि पीपल ग्रामेटिकली करेक्ट नहीं होता है, तो यहाँ पे पीपल्स क्यों लिखा हुआ है? इट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द एक्सेंट एंड इट इज बिकॉज ऑफ इट इज समटाइम्स इन पॉलिटिकल लैंग्वेज आप उस चीज को ऑल्टर कर सकते हैं, ठीक है. तो रेशियल डोमिनेशन अगेंस्ट द डार्क स्किन पीपल्स ऑफ देयर ओन लैंड। ऑब्वियसली वो अफ्रीकन की लैंड थी और वहां पे उन्हीं के साथ ऑपरेशन किया जा रहा था, उन्हीं को दबाया जा रहा था, विच वाज सच अ ह्यूज। ये अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ी आयरनी भी थी और अपने आप में ये बहुत ही पेनफुल इवेंट भी था, ठीक है। सो द स्ट्रक्चर दे क्रिएटेड फॉर्म द बेसिस ऑफ वन ऑफ द हार्शेस्ट most inhumane societies of the world has ever known. Now, in the last decade of the 20th century and my own eighth decade as a man, ठीक है। यहाँ पर देखो, द लास्ट डेकेड ऑफ द 20th सेंचुरी, राइट, बिकॉज 1994 का टाइम है, दैट वाज द लास्ट डेकेड, एंड नाउ माय ओन डेकेड एज अ मैन। तो ये हमें क्या बताता है? टेल्स अस द एज ऑफ नेल्सन मंडेला। ही मस्ट हैव बीन अराउंड 80, ही वाज इन हिज 80s, ठीक है। दैट सिस्टम हैड बीन ओवरटर्न्ड फॉर एवर, कि नो मैटर इतना टाइम लगा, इतना लंबा टाइम लगा, बट फिर भी पूरा सिस्टम बदला and replaced by one that recognized the rights and freedoms of all peoples regardless of the color of their skin, ठीक है। एंड फाइनली एक ऐसा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन एस्टैब्लिश हुआ इस कंट्री में जो कि अनएक्सपेक्टेड भी हो सकता है, जो कि बहुत टायरिंग प्रोसेस रहा होगा, बिकॉज इट वाज अ वेरी लॉन्ग प्रोसेस, लेकिन तब पर भी ऐसा हुआ क्योंकि उन लोगों ने कभी हार नहीं मानी, ठीक है। सो एवरीवन गॉट देयर फ्रीडम एंड this time the freedom was not based on their skin color. Fine. That day had come about through the unimaginable sacrifices of thousands of my people, people whose suffering and courage can never be counted or repaid. I felt that day as if on so many other days that I was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before me. That long and noble line ended and now began again with me. ठीक है, कि बहुत सारे जो पहले प्रेसिडेंट्स रह चुके थे, स्पेशली द ब्लैक प्रेसिडेंट्स बिफोर नेल्सन मंडेला, वो अब उनके पहले थे, एंड अब वो दोबारा से वो लाइन नेल्सन मंडेला शुरू करने जा रहे थे। तो ये चीज उनके लिए एक बहुत ही गर्व की बात थी। इट वॉज अ वेरी प्राउड थिंग फॉर हिम, और उसके साथ ही साथ इट वॉज अ वेरी ओवरवेलमिंग एक्सपीरियंस फॉर हिम, ठीक है। तो began again with me. I was pained that I was not able to thank them and they were not able to see what their sacrifices had wrought. Yes, this is also an important line. वो कहना चाहते हैं कि वो सारे लोग जिन्होंने कंट्री के लिए इतने ज्यादा सैक्रिफाइसेस किए, जो कि एपरथाइड के अगेंस्ट थे, जो कि एपरथाइड के अगेंस्ट लड़ रहे थे, उन सारे लोगों को वो अब थैंक नहीं कर सकते थे, बिकॉज अनफॉर्चुनेटली दे वर नॉट देयर, ठीक है। उन्होंने अपनी लाइफ इस चीज के लिए सैक्रिफाइस की। तो रॉट ओल्ड फैशन फॉर्मल, ओके, डन अचीव्ड, मतलब फाइनली जो अचीव हुआ था, वो चाहते थे कि अगर ये सारे लोग सामने होते तो वो उनको पर्सनली थैंक करते और उनको दिखाते कि फाइनली उनको उनका जो सपना था वो पूरा हो गया, ओके। The policy of apartheid created a deep and lasting wound in my country and my people. Of course, you can imagine, and you should try to think on this. Even recently, even last year, कुछ सालों में भी we had heard about Black Lives Matter and बाकी सारी चीजें। तो वी नो अबाउट रेशियल डिस्क्रिमिनेशन। हम ऐसा नहीं है कि हम नहीं जानते हैं, या ये ऐसा नहीं है कि ये 28 ईयर्स पहले खत्म हो गया। इट स्टिल एग्जिस्ट, बट उस वक्त और अब में काफी फर्क है, ठीक है। जाहिर सी बात है कि दिस थिंग शुड नॉट एग्जिस्ट। मतलब डू यू थिंक इट इज फेयर दैट यू आर डिस्क्रिमिनेटिंग पीपल बेस्ड ऑन देयर स्किन कलर, बेस्ड ऑन देयर रेस? हाउ डज दैट मेक सेंस, राइट? हाउ डज दैट सीम फेयर? बट क्योंकि लोग इस तरीके से कंडीशनड हैं, नॉट जस्ट इन इंडिया, ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड, कि दे थिंक दैट व्हाइट मीन्स लाइक सुप्रीम इन एवरीथिंग। भले ही उस इंसान में कोई क्वालिटी हो ना हो, बट इफ दे आर व्हाइट इन कलर, दे विल बी अप्रिशिएटेड मोर देन एनीथिंग एल्स इन देयर लाइफ। सो दिस इज समथिंग विच इज अ लॉन्ग कंडीशन थिंग थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड, एंड उसको तोड़ते तोड़ते हम अब जाके फाइनली वी हैव कम टू अ प्लेस जहाँ पे अब एटलीस्ट रेशियल डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं होता है। एंड थैंकफुली हमारे कंट्री में रेशियल डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं होता है, ऑल्दो इट स्टिल एग्जिस्ट। पीपल, यू मस्ट हैव हर्ड कि मैरिजेस के टाइम पे लोग डिस्क्रिमिनेट करते हैं विथ विमेन मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम स्पेशली, ठीक है। और और भी ब्यूटी कॉन्टेस्ट होते हैं, ब्यूटी एड्स होते हैं, उनमें भी दे प्रेफर टेकिंग पीपल हु हैव वाइट टोन ऑफ स्किन। तो ये सारी चीजें गलत है, इट कीप्स कमिंग अप टाइम टू टाइम। लेकिन वी दैट इज अ वे ऑफ हर्टिंग द सेंटिमेंट्स ऑफ ऑल दोज पीपल, राइट? तो ये चीज हम गलत कर रहे हैं, और ये चीज हमें समझते समझते काफी टाइम लग गया है। बट आई थिंक एवरीथिंग कैन इम्प्रूव इफ पीपल हैव होप इन देयर हार्ट एंड इफ वी कीप रेजिंग आवर वॉइस अगेंस्ट द राइट थिंग, है ना? तो अब चैप्टर पे वापस आते हैं। तो द पॉलिसी ऑफ एपार्थाइड क्रिएटेड अ डीप एंड लास्टिंग वुंड इन माय कंट्री, ठीक है, एंड माय पीपल। All of us will spend many years, if not generations, recovering from that profound hurt. Obviously, जो सारे लोगों ने ये समय देखा होगा, जो सारे लोगों ने इतने साल तक वेट किया होगा टू ओवरकम दैट ऑपरेशन, कितने सारे जनरेशंस उस चीज से रिकवर कर रहे होंगे, कितने सारे जनरेशंस उस चीज में ऑलरेडी सैक्रिफाइस हो चुके होंगे। तो वो हर्ट बहुत ज्यादा प्रोफाउंड है, ठीक है। बट द डिकेड्स ऑफ ऑपरेशन एंड ब्रूटेलिटी हैड अनदर unintended effect, that was that it produced the Oliver Tambos, the Walter Sicilis, the Chief Uthilis, the Yusuf Dadus, the Bram Fischers, the Robert Sobukfis of our time. Okay, these are African names, तो थोड़ा pronunciation is difficult for me, ठीक है। So यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हो कि इनके फोटोज हैं, एंड यू कैन सी कि कैप्शन में लिखा है these are some prominent names in struggle against apartheid, ठीक है। तो ये सारे लोग थे who fought against the apartheid, who fought against the racial discrimination, okay।